We're joined now by Stephen Moore. He's founder of the Ukraine Freedom Project. Welcome, Mr. Moore. Thanks for taking the time.
Sol, Yashin, great to see you.
Great to see you too, Stephen. So, it's great that NATO countries are coming together, and this is, Ukraine's a major part of the agenda. But the thing is, you're hearing voices, aren't you, in some countries around the world, which are starting to say, well, we need to be giving Ukraine less and spending more on other stuff. What is Ukraine doing to transition from its reliance to such a large extent on international aid?
Well, I will tell you, I live in Kyiv. I'm speaking to you from Kyiv. This past month, I've been in Kherson, Kharkiv, Izum, and I'm going back in a couple of days to the front. So I'm talking to a lot of the military commanders here. And the innovation the Ukrainians are displaying is remarkable because they just had 6 months of an exercise where they realized they could not rely on American aid and the European defense industrial base. If there's a political will, there's not the capacity yet. So, they are not getting enough 155 millimeter shells. And this is like the staple of warfare. This is not the innovation that we talked about just ago. This is the bread and butter of the kind of war that we're in. And in lieu of not having enough 155 millimeter shells, the Ukrainians have started using FPV drones, and they're using them to great effect. Unfortunately, what we're seeing from a NATO perspective is that the Russians are also using drones to great effect against a staple of our war industry, which is the M1A1 Abrams tank. These $500 drones that both sides are using are taking out vastly more expensive pieces of equipment. And, what NATO needs to figure out, my friends that go to NATO training say that, NATO does not tell us about how to use drones. And that's because the Ukrainians are the world's best expert right now in how to use drones in warfare. And this is something that when we're talking about the technology that needs to boost up NATO, this is something that NATO should be paying very close attention to.
So what will Ukraine walk out with after this NATO summit, according to you?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot of people trying to get leverage for different things. And I think that listen, I would love to see Ukraine get into NATO. I don't see it happening right now. Public opinion in the United States actually is kind of bipolar on this because about 7 in 10 Americans think it's a good idea to get Ukraine into NATO. But only about 16% of Americans think that it is a good idea to send troops to Ukraine. So if you're an adversary of Ukraine on getting into NATO, it's a real easy rhetorical thing to say. It's like, oh, you want to get into NATO? How many of your friends, how many of your sons and daughters do you want to send to Ukraine? And that's something it makes it a really tricky issue for any politician to advocate for that. So I think that there's kind of two models. There's the NATO model, and then there's the Israel model. And Israel is a country that has dependably gotten U.S. military aid for a long time. And I think that Ukraine needs to go into the short term into negotiating that sort of guaranteed steady stream of weapons to use against Russia. And it's not only that, it is the ability to use these weapons in a fashion which will make them victorious over the Russians. And we all saw the children's hospital that was bombed yesterday. I saw it in person. It was walking distance from my house. It's horrible. But if the Ukrainians had the ability to use NATO weapons inside Russia to hit some of these airfields where these planes take off with the cruise missiles, things like this could be prevented. So it's not just sending the weapons, it's giving the Ukrainians the permission and the authority to use these weapons to circumvent, to defeat these kind of attacks like we saw yesterday.
Right, yeah, well, clearly air defence is a major issue, has been from the start of the war. What's the mood on the street? I mean, you live in Kyiv, Stephen. What's the mood on the street with regard to joining NATO? Is this something that, you see wherever you go, we'll do what's necessary, but we want to be in NATO? Is that what you're feeling, seeing, hearing?
Ukrainians can't wait to get into NATO. They can't wait to get into the EU. If you look historically on polling of Ukrainians, then prior to 2014, more Ukrainians than a plurality of Ukrainians wanted to be part of the Russian customs union. And then when 2014 happened and the Russians invaded the Donbass and Crimea, that switched up. Then since the support for being in NATO among Ukrainians has just gone up at a really steady pace. So these folks want to be part of the EU. And just an anecdote, when I talk to troops at the front, they tell me, they're like, when we win against Russia, we want to help America do other things around the world. We're the best warriors in the world right now. We want to help America. And so the degree to which these folks are pro-NATO, pro-Europe, pro-America is just to me I love it being a passionate, patriotic American.
Right. Well, let's see what happens at the summit, and hopefully there's some concrete steps coming out of that. Stephen, thank you very much indeed for sharing your expertise with our audience.
Always great to be with you.
Great to be with you. Have a good evening. Stay safe.
See you soon.